What's up, good people? It's your girl India, and you're watching Speaking Indian. So we're in Osaka, and this is the capsule hotel that didn't allow me to check in at 11:01 p.m. because the reception closes at 11. And so I had to book another hotel for a night quickly so I can enjoy the New Year's festivities. The next day, I was up bright and early with my good friend Sarah, who joined me on this Osaka trip, to do some sightseeing at the Osaka Castle Park, which required some slight winter cardio to get to. They want me to walk all the way up here to see a castle. I blame Sarah.
It'll be so worth it.
It will not be worth it. It was worth it. Blogger moment done. We spent the next day living our Harry Potter dreams at Universal Studios Japan. Waiting in long lines in the freezing cold for moments like these, also worth it. The next day, Sarah and I were joined by our friend Nyasha as we headed to a day trip to Kyoto. It wasn't my first time going to Kyoto, but I still got to experience some new parts of the area, such as the Starbucks, which is set in a traditional Japanese building. And just because the crowds were absolutely ridiculous, we had to find back ways to get to familiar places such as the Fushimi Inari Shrine. Smile, guys. Nyasha. Oh, you guys are...
It's so beautiful! Right? I'm so beautiful, I'm gonna die!
Are you a
Overall, enjoying Kyoto with my friends and getting Shake Shack at the end of the day was totally worth it. How is it?
Very nice.
We didn't even swallow it. Still mulling it over. The next day, it was just me and Nyasha doing major touristic things, such as enjoying the Dotonbori River boat cruise. Admiring street art.
That was amazing. Yeah, you did!
And taking in the night views from the Umeda Sky Building.
That building is way off the ground. We are 140.
It was a slightly expensive day, but every yen spent was totally worth it. Hi, it's present day India here to explain exactly what happened on that last day in Osaka. So I really didn't take a lot of footage, even though our last day in Osaka was my favorite day. Hands down, my favorite day. And I'll tell you why. We went to church. And the church service was amazing. I got so much word and revelation from that one church service. But the plan was for me and Nyasha after church to do some more sightseeing. We thought maybe we'll take a quick trip to Nara, see some deer, or do just some more sightseeing within Osaka. But you know, the whole point was just to go to church and continue our trip afterwards. Guess what happens? Church is over, and then we meet two girls who invited us for lunch. Now initially I was like, nah, I'm not gonna do it, because I know y'all church folks. Y'all talk a lot and y'all will keep somebody there for 3 hours. And that's exactly what happened. We went and we were at a Mexican restaurant for a good, I don't even know how long, but they eventually had to kick us out. But the great part that happened at that Mexican restaurant was the conversations that we had. And initially it was kind of awkward because we just met these girls. We don't really know much about them. But at one point, one of the girls, Sasha, so I don't even remember why she started sharing, but she did. And she just started pouring out her whole testimony about how God comforted her when she lost her father. And the thing is, every single word she said was the exact same thing that I was feeling and that I was going through. She was talking about emotions and pain and doubt and moments of grief that I felt like I was going through, but I had no one to share it with. I had no one that I thought would understand. But here I'm listening her to the very detail of her saying that her father was like her best friend. And I'm like, that's the exact same story. I'm listening to the exact same story. The only difference is it was her father and it was my mother. And she didn't know this at the time. She didn't know that I had just lost my mother 3 months ago. But here she was sharing. And in that moment, I just remember I was crying. And she thought initially I was crying because I was sympathizing or empathizing with her. But I was crying for my own reasons, my own pain. But at the same time, it was tears of both joy as well as pain, because I was happy to know that someone understands. But most importantly, I was happy to know that God heard me. Because as she was sharing that testimony, I understood I wasn't alone. Because Sasha decided to just genuinely pour out her heart, it helped me to not have to go through those same stages of grief and doubt and a lack of faith that she went through. I was able to pass a lot of that because of her testimony. And then on top of that, it helped me to realize something even bigger that happened throughout this whole trip. And that was my prayer. My prayer had been answered. See, before this trip, I had made a somewhat silent prayer to God. I think I just kind of said it, as a thought rather than like a on my knees, God, please help me type of prayer. It was a very quick, very just in the moment kind of prayer in which I said, God, I don't want to be alone on this trip. Because in the past, many of the trips that I've been on, I've gone solo. And because, again, I had just lost my mom, all I could think of was feeling sad and lonely if I were to be in a place for a week by myself. And so what happened was I had these awesome friends, Sarah and Yasha. Sarah was there for the first part of the trip, and then Yasha was there for the last part of the trip. And then on top of that, we meet these two wonderful ladies, and it was just kind of like a sprinkling, like sprinkles on the cake. Oh wait, that's not the phrase. It was icing on the cake of this gift that God had given me. The only reason why Sarah and Yasha went is because I asked for them to come. And I was originally worried because it kind of seemed like they weren't going to be able to, but they came. And they came for me, and that was an answered prayer. And then meeting the two ladies, that was extra. That was more, that was abundance. And I didn't realize that until this last day and until we had this conversation. And like I said, we were there for a long time, and eventually we started getting hungry again. And so it was an extra bonus was that we went to a pancake restaurant to do what? Celebrate my birthday. And I remember my uncle called and he said, what did you do for your birthday? How did you celebrate your birthday? And I said, I just went with some friends and had some pancakes. And he goes, that seems kind of lame and boring. But you know what? It's not lame and boring when God gives it to you. That was probably the most perfect birthday celebration that I could have ever had. And it was something I would have never planned for myself. To have these words of encouragement from Sasha, to be with my friends from the beginning of my trip to the end of the trip. You know, all of these people that God placed on this trip were for me. You know, it was for me to not feel lonely. And it was simply because God heard that quiet prayer in my heart. He heard me as soon as, or even before I said it. And so all of these things that happened specifically on that day, it helped me to see that I was never alone. Not only was I never alone in this trip with my friend Sarah and Yasha being there, I was never alone since my mother's death. God has always been there, and He has always heard my voice. He has always heard me crying. And I even remember that first night that I got the phone call that my mother had passed away. I remember crying. I couldn't go to sleep. And I remember just saying such a simple prayer. It was a prayer out of pain as I was crying. I was like, God, please just let me go to sleep. And as soon as I said that, I was out. And I woke up in the morning singing songs. Who wakes up singing songs and joyful after losing their loved one? The person who has been comforted by God does. And that's literally what I felt this whole trip. It was God's comfort, God's hand, God's voice, God's spirit saying, I am with you. I go before you and behind you. I will never take my eyes off of you. And so one thing I want you, whoever you are watching this, to know is that God is singing praises over you. He sings for you. A lot of times we go to church and we sing for Him, but in Zephaniah it says that God sings over us. And even more so, God's thought about us, they are numerous. He knows every hair that is on your head. His thoughts for you are as many as the grains of sand. Okay? He is always thinking about you. So when you are ever feeling like you are lonely and that there's no one in the world for you, just know this: God is watching you. God hears you. He is Jehovah Roy. Okay? He is the God who hears. He is the God who sees. Whatever your pain is, whatever your cry is, however big you think it is, God's voice singing over you is louder. God's arm around you is strong. He is never going to stop loving you. He's never going to stop holding you. He's never going to stop thinking about you. God is never going to stop. He's never going to stop. He is never going to stop. Okay? And because of this, it is so worth it to just spend time with Him. It's so worth it to just go into His presence. It's so worth it to open up your Bible and read the Word. It's so worth it for you to trust God and to pursue a relationship with Him, because out of everyone in the world, He is the one who is on your team. He is the one who wants to see you prosper. He is the one who wants you to live an abundant life. So trust Him. It is so worth it, guys. And so for me, once again, out of this whole trip, the best part about it was God's presence for me. It was God's presence. And He was the one who provided me with my friends. He was the one who provided me with the new friends. You know, He's the one who provided. Why? Because He heard my prayer. Why? Because He loves me. And it's the same for you too. He loves you, He hears you, and He wants you to know that, you know? And so it's totally worth crying out to God. No matter how stupid you think your pain is, cry out to Him. It's worth it. Bye.